Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today, I'll be chatting with Autumn Newman, a poet whose work has appeared recently in the Colorado Review, Cal Express, Pleiades, and the Rising Phoenix Review. She's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and also does some really cool stuff on Instagram with Metrical Mondays, where she shares metrical poems, and Flower Fridays, where she'll just share a cool flower that she's run across that week. I'll put the link to her Instagram down in the description below so that you can check that stuff out too. Today, we'll be talking about her chapbook, A Flower Burst Open, which is about her experiences with intimate partner violence. Her goal with her collection was to speak her truth in a way that makes other survivors of similar violence feel seen without reactivating their own trauma. If it feels like you're in a good space and time to learn more about her work, let's sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
So I'm going to read some poems from my chapbook, A Flower Burst Open. And that chapbook is the story, basically, of my experience with interpersonal violence. So I'll read some poems that take you through the basic story arc. Trapped. The world digests us into women, bleeding, rounded. Childhood snaps shut, and we are pinned insects, jeweled flashes. Or falling, we star, our limbs akimbo, reaching wildly. He caught me, and I liked the eagerness behind his eyes, the readiness to release. I did not know he was a snare. I did not know I was a rabbit. Safety planning pamphlet. Important tips. You are not to blame. You are not alone. Help is available. Document the abuse. Keep a journal hidden under your eyelids. Do not hide it between your legs. He will find it there. Seek medical attention and have them document the abuse. Keep the bits of broken teeth, the plaster casts, and the stitches in your closet. Make copies of bills for damage to property. This includes your medical bills and death certificate. Prepare a safe room in your home. Choose a room with a window. Women have been known to fly in desperate circumstances. Have a telephone in that room. Tape God's number to the receiver. Remove weapons. This refers to physical weapons. Do not attempt to remove your heart. Leaving. I was unfolding. I needed nothing. I left him there on the roadside with nothing. I was expansive, no longer drowning. I left him there on the roadside with nothing. Under the water's surface, then breaking, I left him there on the roadside with nothing. Filling my lungs until I was shaking, I left him there on the roadside with nothing. Shame. Fetal-like, you coil deep inside of me. You whisper, I say yes to it all. You tug at my umbilical and my body feeds you. Tiny beloved. Little one, it's decades I've let you live in catacombs of viscera. I can see my ribs, my collarbones pull skin tight. You drain me, bruised and ferocious. Fading in and out of an anesthetic dream, the past is pulsing fluorescent light. I wake to find you here in my palm, no scalpel needed to loose you. You are clean and smooth as a stone. You beg a mother's caress. Something small stalls my fingers. You were never mine. All I ever needed to do was let go. Unloosed. I am a woman reclaiming her power. Nights on the wing with goshawks and moonlight, passing through woodlands bound by the starflower, weaving through tree trunks abandoned to flight. I am a woman reclaiming her power. Straddling the ocean, I pull down the darkness. Swelling to high tide, I'm birthing the hour. Sunrise emerges, humming to sharpness. I am a woman reclaiming her power. Running with horses wild on the plain, furious, frothing the wind we devour, powerful hoofbeats and spooling our pain. Women who came before me. Beauty is found in the secret places where women breathe fire. Some of you did not survive, so I hold you in breath between water and wave. Those who survived taught us to live in the stone between spark and ignite. Fury is cold in our secret places. All women breathe fire. Most of you passed without record, so I listen to marrow you hum in my bones. All of you spin with the darkness, your heat condensing like prayers at birth. Planets are formed in the secret places where women breathe fire. Thank you.
Autumn, I feel really privileged that you have come on here to read those poems. Um, I think usually this is the part of the interview where I'm just like kind of gushing and giggly about the work, but I feel like my my heart and my soul are so full of those poems right now that doesn't feel like it's in me. Um, especially thinking about the poem that was based on the safety pamphlet. Um, and um, yeah, the part about keeping records, the medical records and things, including the death certificate, and that, man, um, I have not been in a situation of personal violence like that. I grew up in a violent home, which is a slightly different, like it's similar in many, many ways, but a different, yeah, different. Um, but yeah, the thing about women have been known to fly, like everything is just so beautiful and so powerful. And yeah, thank you for coming on and 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 sharing those. Yeah, and lots of I can't remember because we've been in some workshops and things together. I can't remember what your favorite meter is, but I heard a lot of trochees. Is that a meter that you gravitate towards, or was it just the one that was standing out for me today?
Yeah, I love trochees. What I read has a lot of dactyls. I really like falling meters.
Okay.
There's a lot of dactyls in there, which, you know, Annie Finch would tell us makes sense because it's all about emotion and the body, right? So
Right. Yes. Yeah. For sure. Um, yeah, and I mean I I kind of vibe with that, the idea of the dactyls going with emotions. Um, and they're fun to play with. You can get nice long lines out of dactyls.
yeah.
Well, since we've been talking about Annie, who I know is a poet that we both love, Why don't you tell me about a poet that you love that you're in love with right now?
Okay, everyone needs to go buy this book. It's called To Be Named Something Else, and it's by Shaina Phenix. And I actually wrote a book review for this that's going to come out in the Colorado Review soon. Because I started writing book reviews because I would read a book and I just couldn't contain it. You know, those books where you get to the end and you want to just go straight back to the beginning again. And you're like, how did they do that? Oh my God, you just made me cry and laugh at the same time. And this book is so, like, it contains the ordinary, it contains immense tragedy. It's full of different forms. I learned about the burning high bun from her, and the nested arroyo. So she's got new forms, she's got old forms. And she's so skillful and she's so effortless. You know, she just makes it seem easy. You know, it's like, oh, you could write that poem, you know. And it's winner of, I always forget this, it's the 2023 winner of the Miller Williams Poetry Prize, which is selected by Patricia Smith, who's a poet I also admire greatly. So Shaina Phenix is just, she has my heart. She has my heart right now, big time.
Oh, excellent. I see you have the book there. Are there any of her poems that you would like to that you want to share with us?
Oh, I'm sure I could find one. The downside of writing book reviews is I have marginalia all over here. So sometimes it's like because I liked a poem, but sometimes it's just because I needed to say something for the thing. Mm, there is one, and I'm gonna try to find it. Pantoums, she's got a duplex. Ars Poetica. She's got like these poems that sing back and forth to each other. Okay. Yes. Almost owed. Up until this point, the fish bones that hold together my pelvis have ached. And I'm no fish, but easily snapped. Each time you are a dream, and I am an ocean of if. I name your almost many times, a fuller poem than the last, and I, black skin and an opening, have been taught to pray to men to believe everything worth anything is the body that enters, never the entered. And I have sat in a field of oxtails, empty of your almost, their grave plum middles, murmuring about the everythingness of God according to Shug Avery. And thus, this is a praise song for a good body, is a woman, sorry, a God body, is a woman that I could be something enough to build a habitat of self, however brief. I am a blues tune for a war torn ovarian plain. I am 21, a wondering mess, still a milk mouth round. My mother's breast, and my mother an oak full of mourning, and her mother hallowing in the dirt, and we are the bloodline of almosts, and still praise for our holy innards. And you I love like crops in spring dew, the dung smudged earth, praise the sucking tube flesh that inverts your almost, petitions the earth for a second chance on my behalf. Praise the Lazarus tomb in my gut for my 6 week almost. Praise the nurse who looks into the sonogram, swivels my insides in the direction of the examination table, does not compare your almost to a nut or fruit of some variety to hold when I cannot fathom my limbs, and I call you by the almost name. Kendi, Akai, Elizabeth, Carter, as if to call you, loved one of a risen sun, undead, ungone, my girl. To say I, you're almost, would mass a world in which you are a palm for tracing with my fingers, if given the chance to say that I know God best because of your perhaps. I should have picked one I could read without crying,
Wow. Yeah.
but that's my favorite.
Wow. Um, what what do you love most about that particular poem?
All that she manages to say without saying it explicitly, how she can take grief and turn it into something beautiful.
I'm sorry. When I get emotionally overwhelmed, I don't really have much to say, which is kind of a bad characteristics in an interviewer. It's like, yeah, totally true. Yes. And there's like six conversations going on in my head right now about it.
I
Yeah.
should say that that book is not full of poems like that. There's also an ode to denim jeans. There's a poem about a white lady sashaying into her ham and egg and cheese place in the Bronx. And what is she doing here in my Bronx? And she's ordering it wrong. This is how you order it. It's great. So there's lots of like just daily ordinary poems too, and they're all meshed together with it's like a life. It's like that whole book is like a life with the mundane and the ordinary and the vexing and the trauma and the grief. It's like it's just all mixed in there.
Oh. So when you were crafting a flower burst open, did you have to be named something else in your mind when you were crafting yours as a model or no?
No, I read that much later. I read that after the book was done. It took a long time to write a book, and then it's taken a long time once it was accepted to get it published. Was kind of a long road.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I didn't at that point I didn't have any models for what I was writing about. I still have yet to see a book about interpersonal violence, although that's not true. I know of one now. It's a new one that just came out called Post-Traumatic Poems. But it's about, I believe, as I understand it, it's about a very specific, really horrific violent event. Um, but I will definitely be reading that book. That's one of the reasons I wrote this book, was because there's so many of us out there and we're so underrepresented.
Do you have a sense or theory for why that's so underrepresented in poetry?
um, Two things, and these two things help domestic violence thrive. One of them is it's not something we talk about. Even now, after the Me Too movement, it's like we talk about rape, we talk about abuse, we talk about family violence. Nobody talks about domestic violence because it makes people uncomfortable. And the second reason is because there's so much shame when you are a victim or a survivor of interpersonal violence. Um, because we don't talk about it and because we have a very poor understanding of how those relationships work, we get blamed. We get blamed for staying. We get blamed for staying too long. We get blamed for a lot when it's actually the people who are violent that are the ones that are guilty. But those two things kind of work on a social level, and I think they definitely that's reflected in the lack of representation in poetry specifically.
Um, and okay, I'm just gonna say what's in my head. Um, because I'm one it I'm wondering if the workshop system may also have something to do with that silencing. Um, for all those reasons, and then also thinking of many of the workshops I've been in that have had male workshop leaders, um, and their way of interacting with the female experience. And so I'm just gonna throw that thought out into the
I would agree with that, absolutely. Yes.
oh.
Yeah,
Um,
you get it from both ends. It's like the male dismissiveness of our experience and calling anything we write about ourselves, what is it, confessional, which is a dirty word. If women write it, men get to write about themselves, but if we write about ourselves, it's dirty. Um, and then and then from women, you're going to have a lot of women who are traumatized by this kind of violence or similar violence, and who therefore don't really want to hear about it. And that's, I mean, that's legitimate. I don't want to re-traumatize people. I worked very hard writing the book to make something that wasn't going to be re-traumatizing for survivors. Um, but you need help in a workshop to get there, right?
right, yeah. Um, yeah, I think Sundress does a, I don't know if they, I say does a, but it maybe did a. They had at least one retreat where it was a workshop and writing retreat where it was trauma informed, and they had and it was for survivors writing about stuff. If I'm remembering correctly, and I don't know if it's something that they do sort of periodically or if they just did it that once, but I remember thinking that is an amazing idea. That is so necessary.
That
Um,
is amazing. I would love to do that.
I will okay, this is me putting it in my brain that I'll look it up and see if it's something that they have continued to do, or if it was just that once, and try to get the information down in the description below if I can find anything on it. Um
Thank you.
but yeah, I was like, yeah, that's such a good idea. Um yeah, um domestic violence is something that often fiction and nonfiction will have more than poetry. Do you have I'm going to ask a question that I don't know much about. So, but I've heard about This Ends With Us, the movie that just came out based on the Colleen Hoover book about domestic violence. And some people saying this is a great thing, and some people saying this is the movie and the book are not are doing more harm than good in some ways. And so I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, so they'll have to be general, but I have thoughts on everything, as you know. Okay, so I haven't read the book. I have seen a preview for the movie. And I don't know what the critiques are, but it's kind of, I don't want to make that analogy. Okay, it's I would err on the side of, yes, give me a reference, give me give me that movie. Give me a movie about domestic violence. If you fuck it up in some if you mess it up in some way, um I'm probably going to forgive you for it. I mean, some things would be really bad if it's upholding societal stereotypes that are harmful for the woman. Um, then that's not going to be good. But you know, it's like it's like we say, representation matters, and then you introduce new characters, new themes, new topics, and then people are always going to pick them apart and be like, that's not what those people are really like, that's not what this is really like. But it's like, representation matters, let's just get it out there, and we can fine tune as we go along, like we'll get better as we go along, but like, let's just get it out there. Like, to have a movie, what I would have given as an 18-year-old girl to see a movie about that that would have meant the world to me, and maybe it wasn't my story, maybe it wasn't quite right, but um to know that people care enough about the issue would have meant a lot to me.
Yeah. And hopefully people caring beyond just sort of lip service and awareness months or days or those kind of things, but real deep caring that actually means legislative and societal change around those issues too.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of your, I'm gonna, I'm just gonna cry. Um, uh, okay, I can do this. Speaking of your 18-year-old self, what advice would you have if you could go back to her or to any earlier version of Autumn, really? It doesn't have to just be 18-year-old, but what kind of advice would you give to an earlier version of yourself?
To myself in general, it's not your fault. And to the writer, to the poet, the budding poet that I was, read, read and write. I was one of those people who I thought if I read other books of poetry that it would influence and I would steal things unknowingly, and I thought it would be bad. I wanted to be original and I wanted to be me and have my voice, and I thought reading other poets would somehow take that away from me. The years I wasted not reading books. So yeah, read and write. I was undisciplined. I didn't write. And that was because I had deep-seated fear that I wasn't good enough. Like I walked around with all this bravado, and I tattooed poet across my chest. But really, yeah, this was at like 20. But really, I was just terrified, and I knew I really wanted to do this thing, and I was terrified that I wasn't going to be any good at it. So I didn't write.
So when you got poet tattooed on your chest, you weren't really writing very much?
No.
That is such a that is such a like 20-year-old thing to do, right? Like,
I have grown into it, but yeah, no, I wasn't.
I love it. Um, when you got it, did you I know I already know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it like I don't. Um, when you got it, did you have the metrical markings on it
No,
originally?
these are new. These I got in the last year. And yeah, I love them. They're my favorite.
Nice. And they also kind of show the development in your poetic journey too, right? Like adding them on.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And
Um, when you finally did start reading other poets, who was the first poet that you sort of latched onto once you were like, "Oh yeah, reading other poets is a great idea."
hmm. Okay, I'm just gonna. Hmm. I don't I don't think she was the first, but she definitely lit a spark in me, and that was Annie Finch's book Calendars. I took a class in undergrad, and he was teaching formal and metrical poetry, and I just thought that was ridiculous and was gonna go in and show him how stupid it was. And then I read Annie Finch, and I'm like, you can be a feminist and write in form. I'm like, I want that. I want it so bad.
I'm I'm jealous that you got to talk about formal poetry in, and I'm assuming it was in one of the writing classes and not one of the lit classes.
Mhm. Yep, I was
Ah,
very lucky, very lucky.
yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
And then because when you did your master's, you worked with Annie during your master's too, right? Because I met you during Poetry Witch, where we were all working with Annie, but yeah, you got to work with her in your actual program too.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a dream come true.
Yeah, because I think so many people still have that image of formal poetry as being something that happened way back, or that people who don't really understand real contemporary poetry do, or something, right? Like people get sort of these stupid images in their head. So yeah, her work always blows me away and opened me up to so many other people's stuff too. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
um I find it interesting that when you were talking about your advice to your younger self, you said that your advice, what you would want to say would be, it's not your fault. Um, and I'm curious, though my curiosity doesn't mean you have to answer this. So you can just be like, nah. Um, I'm curious that you would say it's not your fault as opposed to telling that earlier version of yourself to get out sooner or something like that. I'm interested in that difference there.
Oh, so I was at 18, well, at a certain point of 18, I was already out.
Okay.
Um, but even even if I had been in the relationship still, I think hearing it's not your fault would have been more productive than get out, because it was very hard to get out. And there was a lot of feelings tied up in the relationship. But if I could start getting down, one of the things abusers do is they tear you down emotionally. You're nothing, you're horrible, you're this, you're that, you can't be trusted, you don't know how to do anything. They just really tear you down. And so you think, and then you're faced with like a very, very scary, difficult decision, and you've been told how worthless you are. How are you going to making that decision is so hard, so hard. um so yeah, I think hearing that it's not my fault, because then of course they tell you everything's your fault, including the violence. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's a complicated dynamic.
Yeah. Um, I guess I had not, because I've known you for a little bit now, and I had not realized that you were that young when the abuse happened. Um, which, okay, again, six conversations going on in my head at once, and we'll see what actually funnels through the mouth. Um, yeah, because when you're that young, you're also still formulating who you are in the world and how you exist in the world, and to have that on top of that is shitty.
And
That's
that, yeah, I was 17, and that's actually the most common. um young women, young girls, I think it's 17 to 20, might even not be that old. That's, if my statistics are still right, um, the most common age for domestic violence, because these are predators. And so they pick easy bait, and you're 17, that's easy bait. Because, like you said, you're still formulating yourself, you're still very insecure, so,
yeah, yeah. Um, do you think that younger version of yourself, what advice do you think that she might have for you now if she could see older Autumn with poet on her chest and the Ictus and Breve on there and stuff? What do you think
oh, she'd
she'd
be
say?
surprised in so many ways. She would say, stop second guessing yourself. Like, I just, I do that a lot. I'll write a poem, and then a couple months later, I'll go back to it. And it had been one of my favorites. I thought it was great. And then I go back to it. Oh, it's horrible. No, throw it away. It's terrible. I have a very strong inner critic, and in some ways it serves me well because I revise and revise. Um, but yeah, at some point, just gotta stop second guessing yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I I hear that. Stop second guessing and let let the journals and editors make a decision in terms of if they want to accept something as opposed to just not even sending it out because you worry too much about it. Like go with that first instinct that it's amazing and
Yeah,
set it out there in the world.
yeah, yeah. There's something to be said for that first instinct.
Yeah. What's the uh I can't remember. There's a Terry Pratchett quote about uh like first thoughts and second thoughts. Um but then it's like it's actually the third thoughts that are actually right. Like the third or fourth thoughts that it's like you have your initial thought, then you have second guessing yourself, and then you can actually get to the real meat of the matter to come up with stuff.
I'm gonna test that. I'm gonna test that.
Yeah, it's in the same have you ever read any Terry Pratchett?
No, I haven't actually.
He has one of his books he has lots of witches and things, and the witches she's training a young girl in this particular book, and is like um she's trying to sort of give her this pep talk, and it's like if you know what you want, and the little girl's like yeah, and you try really hard, yeah, and you know do everything right, yeah, you still might not get what you want.
Ain't that the truth?
And I was like I wrote that and like hung it on the wall that I was like, I mean, it was, paraphrasing, but like, yeah, I need to remember that. Like it isn't about getting what you want or not, like, because you can do everything right and still not get what you want in the poetry world or in sort of the broader world. So that second guessing comes from a place of assuming that if you could just do it right, you'll get the thing. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I like the third thought because I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, okay, first thought is it was brilliant. Second thought, it was trash. Third thought, revise, stupid, make it better. I'm like, yeah, I like that third thought. That's that's the thought.
Yeah, yeah, I think you would probably dig some of Terry Pratchett's stuff because he's very funny, but then his stories are very funny, but then they're also pretty deep and have some good stuff in it that I feel like he really gets to the core of how a lot of stuff in life works. Um,
What's your favorite book? Do you have one?
um,
Or one that you would start with?
I think I think some of the best ones are the witches ones. So there's Weird Sisters, Lords and Ladies. Um, what else? I feel like there's one that has the witches in it that's not great. It's like one where somebody goes to be an opera singer and it's sort of this fake Phantom of the Opera sort of thing, but there's a lot of sometimes Terry Pratchett like borderline fat shames, but then like there'll be a purpose to it in terms of like trying to turn that on its head. But to turn it on its head, he has to do it first, and you're like,
You're like,
oh my
oh.
God. But then the We Free Men, that series, the Tiffany Aching series, or Aching, probably Aching. I've never heard it actually pronounced out loud, but that series is really good too. That part of it. So he's fun. That's my that's my random bit from this interview is my
No,
love
I
for
love
Terry
it.
Pratchett.
Just finished Lord of the Rings my second time through, and I need some fantasy in my life, and it would be great if it had women in it.
Yeah. Um Yeah, most of his Discworld stuff has strong female characters in it. You have to like the beginning books, not so much, but then as the series goes on, you get more and more. And what is it called? The 13th Regiment, I think is the name. Um, no, the Monstrous Regiment. That's what it is. The Monstrous Regiment. Um, that's a I think you would like that one. Um, have you ever read any Naomi Novik?
No.
I feel like you would also enjoy some of her stuff in terms of fantasy stuff. Um, there are Marxist dragons in one of her series. So Marxist talking dragons.
That's
Everybody
awesome.
needs that in their life, right? It's so
I
good.
certainly do. I can't
Yeah.
get it in real life. I'll get it in a book.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I mean fantasy is so good for that kind of thing. Um I'm trying to think
I
thought
just
there
got
was
an
some
Octavia Butler book. I can't remember the title. It's a series. Um, but I've been meaning to read some Octavia Butler, so I'm excited about that.
oh yeah. Um cool. Well, in terms of time, I feel like I we should probably um wrap up the interview though. Honestly, I want to sit here and just talk about books and give book recommendations. My TBR list gets huge after each one of these. So, thank you for coming on and for sharing your poetry that is so um not to be cliche, but I'm gonna be cliche. It is so brave and so powerful. And I'm so glad that we have your poetry in the world and that you're choosing to share it with folks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun. It's been fun.
Wow, what a powerful interview that was. I hope you got as much out of our time with Autumn as I did. Her book, A Flower Burst Open, is available now for pre-order from Finishing Line Press. If you're watching this in 2025, it's already available. Links will be down in the description below for you. Thanks for stopping by.